Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book, How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you Fargo? You can. In the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey y'all, it's me, your girl, your host, Elena Grace, and you're listening to episode 101 of I've Been Thinking. You might have also noticed that this episode sounds, well, the beginning at least, sounds a little different than usual, and that is because as of right now, we are proudly presented by Stoveleg Media. So that is a really exciting new thing for me. I am just so proud that all of my hard work and all of the support that I've been given over the past 2 years has culminated in me being picked up by this really awesome network, and that they are going to work to help me grow even more. So I'm so grateful for that. Shout out to Nate, who I met in a bar. Adam and I met him in a bar in Covington like over a year ago. Shout out to Devin Hale for being the person we were all there to see play live. Just thank you to everybody. This is my announcing this to the world. Like, I have not told my parents. I have not told most of my friends. I've only told like very few people. So this is it. Welcome to a new chapter of I've Been Thinking. I am so excited. And what more fitting chapter to begin than on episode 101? Like, how awesome and serendipitous is that it just so happened to be episode 101 that this begins with. I am just really thankful and really excited. So yeah, there you go. So there won't be a ton of changes. You will hear, the sound stamp, and some ads and some stuff like that. So that is really exciting, but the content will never change, only as the podcast evolves naturally, as it has done over the past 2 years. That'll be the only difference. Don't worry. They ain't telling me what to say. Ain't nobody can do that. Anyway, they want us here for who we are, and that is really important. So moving on from that excitement to the excitement at hand, today's episode. So I have interviewed for you guys outrageously Octavia Griffiths. She's an incredible creator. She is a certified nervous system practitioner. She works with people remotely, which is really awesome, to help them heal their bodies and help them learn to advocate for themselves as they're undergoing chronic illnesses. So this is a really awesome episode where she shares about her own journey with chronic illness. She has had very severe endometriosis which is very near and dear to my heart, and you'll hear more about that in the episode. But she just does an incredible job of advocating for herself, advocating for others, and teaching others how to advocate for themselves, which is just so, so important. We also talk about support systems. We talk about social media. Surprise, surprise, I'm talking about social media, but we really run the gambit in the best way. And I really hope that, if nothing else, this episode gives you a new perspective on chronic illness and lets you see inside that world of somebody experiencing a chronic illness a little bit more closely and maybe a little bit differently. So, with all that being said, thank you so much, so much for being here. Make sure you follow the podcast at I've Been Thinking Pod. The website is still the same, www.I'veBeenThinkingPod.com, and the Patreon is still the same as well, patreon.com/I've Been Thinking Pod. Now, here's Octavia.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'll start with saying that I'm so over the moon to be here. So to introduce myself, my name is Octavia Griffiths. I guess I want to start with just like saying that I'm just like your normal average human on this planet. In terms of my profession, I essentially am a certified nervous system practitioner. And to actually explain what that is, I work with people with chronic symptoms all around the world, essentially helping them understand why they got sick, they can get better. And we do that by regulating the autonomic nervous system. So that's really my speciality. And I'm sure we'll kind of dive into this in this episode, but the way that I found myself here and where I am now as a practitioner, so I used to work in the healthcare industry. Healthcare has always been my passion. That was in the corporate London city world. So it was really very fast paced. And in all honesty, I couldn't keep up. It was a very toxic work environment. And I have endometriosis. And with the stress and to be honest, a really lack of support, we'll go with lack of support. I ended up getting really sick and my symptoms just completely spiraled out of control. And long story short, I ended up quitting my whole life. I quit my job. I left London, broke up with my 3-year long-term relationship. And I moved halfway across the world to South Africa to dedicate all of my time and energy to getting better. And that took me on a journey to discovering all about the nervous system. That was the thing that has taken me from being bedbound, wheelchair bound, having pretty much no quality of life as a young 20-something, to somebody who's now thriving, has no symptoms, no pain, no fatigue, and helps other people navigate that journey when, unfortunately, the doctors and consultants, don't really know how to help us. So a little bit of a long intro, but that's me. Yeah.
Not a long intro at all. And that is a really amazing story that you turned your life around from this thing that was literally sucking all of the life out of you, into something that brings you passion and that you're also able to help others through as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Thank you.
So can we talk a little bit about your symptoms being so severe, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Because being wheelchair bound from endometriosis and I have personally never known anybody who had such severe symptoms. My mother has had, I'm not sure. Either way, she has had endometriosis in my lifetime, and my cousin has it pretty severely as well. And it's something that I worry about for myself too. It's never been something that I've been, you know, told that I have, but at the same time, I'm like, have any of my doctors checked for that? I'm really not sure. But anyway, yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about the severity of that, because it's wild and scary.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think the thing with endo is it just impacts us all in so many different ways, and it's such a gray area within the healthcare system in general that so many of us kind of go undiagnosed. And yeah, I mean, you have every right to, I guess, like, you know, to a certain extent, be aware, be concerned, because it is a hereditary condition. So my mum has it, my little sister has it. So yeah, I feel you on that front. For me, I went through, I want to say, like a big roller coaster battle with being a very passive player in my own well-being. So I was very much at the mercy of kind of seeing loads of different consultants, being sent here, there, and everywhere, like no one really knowing what to do with me. So it was a case of try this, try that, without really telling me what the side effects could be, or all of these different things that led me to this place of pretty much not being able to get out of bed. I mean, in my specific case, and I'll caveat this with everybody's body reacts differently, so this is just my personal story, but I would say my symptoms in terms of getting diagnosed, I mean, they were already pretty severe when that happened. So I was on my year abroad. We have that in England. It's called like Erasmus. I was in Paris, and I just noticed my periods just changed. And it's just something that I guess, like, as a woman, you just notice like something's different here. But I didn't yet have any pain. It was only when I came, actually, after about 6 months, I decided to stop taking the contraceptive pill. And it was like slowly but surely things started to happen in my body, and I didn't really do anything about them. I was abroad. And then when I got back, it was on the days of my period, I would suddenly just be in excruciating pain, particularly when I had a bowel movement. I'm going to also caveat this episode with, like, there is going to be a lot of TMI, but, you know, it's really important for education and awareness purposes. So I went through a lot of doctors and consultants trying to understand why this was happening to me, because in those instances I would honestly be in so much pain that, firstly, I couldn't pass the bowel movement, and secondly, I was like one step away from kind of calling an ambulance and going to like the emergency services, which just wasn't normal, and it wasn't sustainable, and I was so fatigued, and I'd be in bed. So then we tried, I saw a consultant, tried different things. Long story short, I ended up getting the Mirena coil, which is a go-to, what's it called? Kind of hormonal treatment therapy for people with endometriosis. And that for me worked perfectly for about 7 months, before my body just full on started rejecting it. And that is where I'm pretty sure the coil was like almost like halfway inside, halfway outside. And because of the endometriosis, so I would go and see people saying my body is just, I can't even go to like a spinning session, I can't do exercise without passing out in pain afterwards. Right. All these normal things that I can't do. And everybody kept saying to me, well, I think we should keep the coil in because you have endometriosis. And so I kept finding myself again in this gray area of telling people that it really wasn't working, but people seeing my condition as a reason to kind of keep that in. Essentially with the stress that I had, I kept having these flare-ups that would just cause excruciating pain and debilitating fatigue. And for me, that was my life for months in 2019. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's absolutely, I mean, it's awful, and I'm so sorry you went through that. So at what,
Because I appreciate it.
of course, at what point did you realize like these doctors, these consultants, they're really not helping me? I need to kind of go on my own journey and do my own thing and figure out how to fix myself, because we have to, we're conditioned to trust our doctors and to trust, the experts and all of that. And 98% of the time that works, or what, it, but sometimes there are things that are just out of their purview, because humans are also unique.
Yeah. It's such a good question. I was sat here being like, reflecting on my journey, trying to remember. I mean, I think in terms of my personal journey, it was actually my mental health, believe it or not, that essentially caused me to realize that I would have to do something to help myself. In a long story short, my physical symptoms made me so sick that I had to take a very considerable time off work, which, as you can probably imagine, in corporate London is not very well received. There's like no support, and I found myself in a situation where I was really suffering mentally, with all of the pressures and trying to keep up, not being able to keep up. And it was like a huge, almost like attack on my identity. I'd always been this really successful person. I'd been doing really well at work, and then suddenly everything was taken away from me. I couldn't even go to work anymore, and I didn't even know what was really happening to me, so I couldn't even really advocate for myself, because really in a lot of people's eyes it could just come down to bad period pains, right? And more often than there were a few occasions where I was just told that it was all in my head. So that started to mess with my head a lot, and I was having to take, as I said, a lot of time off work, and I kept going to the doctor, and people didn't really know kind of how to help me. I wasn't really able to get advice on how to manage kind of the situation that I was in, almost like the pressure of needing to work as somebody who was chronically ill, but endometriosis isn't something that receives disability benefits in the UK. So having that kind of situation go on, and then people can only really sign you off work for almost stress and certain chronic symptoms, at least the ones that I was struggling from, for 2 weeks. So it was just no one really, I feel provided me with this safe space where I could really understand what it was that was happening to me, and no one really kind of gave me any light at the end of the tunnel. And to be totally honest, I ended up just completely burning out and having to take a step back from everything. And that was kind of the start of my own journey of, okay, well, I feel a little bit like I'm on my own here, so what can I do? Where can I start? And yeah, that's kind of what happened. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't blame you. That's an incredibly stressful situation. I can't imagine it, how you felt. Incredibly stressful. Then you get the burnout that comes with it, because you're just stressed all the time about these things that are out of your control. That's a lot. So when you started healing, was that in the UK, or was that after you moved to South Africa?
That was after I moved to South Africa. So the UK was very much, so this was for us our second lockdown due to COVID in England, and the South African borders. So my family moved to South Africa, let's say kind of when I moved to London. So we were in completely different parts of the world, and for COVID, South Africa closed their borders. So it was kind of this whole time that I was so sick on certain days that I would literally have to I remember crawling, it was so bad, out of my third floor apartment into an Uber to try it, because I didn't feel like I could call an ambulance because of this whole gray area situation.
Right.
And other people are more of an emergency than me, and so I didn't really have a support system that the whole time. So 2019, then 2020 happened, COVID, and I was living on my own in that kind of second quarantine. And yeah, we were just about to be told by, I'm trying to remember if it was Boris Johnson. I can't remember who the prime minister was at that point. But yeah, he was about to lock us down again. And I remember my mental health was so bad. And I was like, no, there's just no way. I can't do another lockdown. And I definitely can't do it by myself. So I got very, very lucky. It just so happened that the South African regulations changed. And if you were able to get yourself to like a green country, because there was this like list of red, green, whatever. The UK was very much red. If I got myself to a green country, they'd let me in, and I could at least go back to my support system that I'd kind of been it was really mentally challenging as well, knowing that like I couldn't be with my family because the borders were closed. And I actually ended up flying to Cyprus. I quarantined there for 14 days. And then I made it through the border into South Africa by the skin of my teeth. As I said, I'd quit my job. So that kind of huge pressure. I think, in all honesty, my job and the lack of support and the mental stress and burnout from that, and then stress and the burnout was what also triggered my symptoms. So it was this horrendous vicious cycle.
Absolutely.
That was one of the biggest contributors to my ill health at the time, and was one of the biggest contributors to me being stuck in survival mode, and my nervous system being constantly dysregulated, and the chronic stress and the trauma of all of that. So once that was gone, I found that my symptoms were a lot less triggered, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Still pretty bad, but there was definitely a decline in the symptoms, and mostly in the pain and the flare-ups, that allowed me to, for example, do things like start therapy, actually start getting some support, and really kind of not feel like I was under threat every single minute of every day. So yeah, that very much happened in South Africa. Yeah,
that's awesome that you were able to get back to it. And I can't imagine the stress of that whole situation of trying to get back, because I know that was very difficult. But I'm glad that you were able to get back to a support system and get back to a safe space where you could start to unwind and heal yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the point where I started following you, because I remember, I think it is, because as you said that, I was like, I do remember you posting things about like being back home in South Africa, or like being home with your family in South Africa, and healing and feeling better and that kind of thing. I think that's kind of when I came in. So,
oh, cool. That's really cool to know. Yeah. I mean, I like to think that as a person, I've almost like tried to really just be super authentic, really embody like my truth. I think, and more than anything, that was a huge part of my healing journey. And it's incredible really how much Instagram, which is so often seen as this negative place, and there is a lot of negativity, but it's played a big role in the reclamation of who the fuck I am and what I stand for, and not being afraid anymore to be that person and to actually meet my own needs, and to be like, to feel safe in my own body, even if that's showing up online, and like the connections that it's allowed me to make. And just knowing that like I've been so transparent about the whole journey from the very beginning, and like knowing that you've been there as well is just it feels really cool for sure.
It's really cool. And I think you're exactly right. Instagram, it obviously can be a toxic place, but then at the same time, I think has been, and this is like my unpopular opinion about social media. I think that it has given so many people the opportunity to discover their favorite version of themselves, and to really be that version in ways that I remember when I was growing up, when I was, a high school student in the 2010s, and Instagram had only just come out, and it was not what it is today. And like I felt like I had to dress the status quo, like in high school, or be or do or whatever those things. And now I think it's so awesome that younger people are able to be whoever they want to be, thanks to Instagram. That is an aside, but I feel really strongly about that, and I'm glad that you got to experience that. And I'm glad that we're all getting to experience that, because that is something that I've definitely experienced now as like in my 20s, I guess, where social media has helped me kind of come into who I am.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm actually just sat here listening to you thinking that like this is a really good time for me to say, and I'll also caveat this. I know a lot of people who've had mixed experiences, as with the world in general, with social media. But for me personally, when I felt like super alone, and I was kind of, distanced from my family and my support network, and quite frankly had no fucking clue what was going on, like happening to me in my body. And actually it would put a huge strain on my friendships. I went from being this girl who would go out all the time and love to party, and like, it was just like a huge extrovert, to somebody who literally couldn't do anything for themselves or leave their room. And I think, understandably or not understandably, my friends and my housemates at the time, I think, found that just really confusing. I'm going to go with confusing. And for me, social media and the world of, or like the chronic illness community online, was just like life-changing for me. I mean, I connected with, due to people's accounts, I was able to connect with people from my old university who now had chronic conditions, and like that like brought us really close together, and we could go for coffee, and we could be so almost like understanding and inclusive of like one another's conditions, and like how fast we needed to walk, where we needed to meet up, that kind of thing. And so that kind of online world really started to pour into my real life. And I think particularly when you are navigating things like chronic symptoms, chronic pain, just fatigue, things that stop you from just being able to function as you have known yourself to be able to your whole life, having this little online world to escape to, when and you don't have to move, you can just kind of sit there on your phone, is really like just life-changing for so many of us who really suddenly find like our whole lives taken away.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you were able to find that community through social media and get at least some of the support that you needed and deserve. So that social media community, were they able to start kind of giving you guidance and resources towards healing, or a little bit maybe?
Yes. So it's an interesting one. I think truthfully, the answer to that is probably no. But what they did to me, like more than anything, which I actually think played a huge role in kind of making me feel safe in my body, which I can kind of expand on that or not from like more of a clinical perspective, but in like, normal everyday terms, that's essentially what was happening. This sense of solidarity and this support, and seeing other women, and particularly at the beginning when I was really kind of just focused on like connecting with other women who had endometriosis, seeing other people so boldly, like sharing what they were going through, and seeing that, for example, in speaking to doctors, they'd never mentioned anything about this concept of like endobelly, which is where you basically look pregnant, which again is just, I feel like endometriosis is such a very psychologically toxic it's challenging because, you know, you'll have this like endo belly, and like I've had people say to me, oh, like, how many months pregnant are you? And then people with endometriosis, there's a lot of us who don't know to what extent our fertility will be impacted. And so like it's just so horrible in you know, in that sense. But seeing that was like a symptom that I knew that I had, but I didn't know that it was a symptom that was a symptom of endo until I discovered the world of Instagram, you know, and just small things like that. Yeah, and having people to speak to and making friends and really branching out. I'd say it's funny, like actually a lot of my chronic illness community friends don't have endometriosis. A lot of my closest friends have things like ME, CFS, so chronic fatigue syndrome, things like more like gastro issues. But it's funny, I just finally found this community. I just felt safe to be myself, and where I felt like people really understood me, and that was very, very healing for sure.
That is certainly healing. And that's sometimes that's like the biggest jump you need. Yeah. You saying that about endo belly, it made me laugh a little bit. My mom, of course, had endometriosis pretty much my whole life. It got worse at some anyway, with stress and things like that. And a lady at church asked her once, Karen, I didn't know that you were pregnant. Congrats. How many months are you? And she said, I'm not pregnant, Edith. I'm just fat, apparently. And that is my favorite comeback of my mother's possibly ever. Because that really, she would just say that to people. After that, she was just like, you know what? And I don't think she knew at that time that that's what it was either, that it was like, you know, endometriosis. But that really would shut the people down. They were like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't comment on other people's bodies without knowing what's going on.
Honestly, and you know what, it's really fascinating that you say like about your mom not necessarily knowing what that was. I mean, I feel like it's really interesting. Well, it was really interesting to me. I mean, my mom, she had like huge fibroids, and she had like her womb, like a womb ablation, which is essentially where they cauterize your womb. Her symptoms were slightly different to mine. She was like much more on the like heavy bleeding, that kind of thing. She went through her whole adult life, having kids, all of the ups and downs with that, because it was never straightforward. And no one ever told her that she had endometriosis. So we found out that she had endometriosis when I received my diagnosis, and I was suddenly like, wait a second, like, you have all the same symptoms as me. I think you have endometriosis. I think you should go and see the consultant that I've just seen, who's been like the first person to actually help me. And that was like a huge thing because, for example, my little sister, so I'm 27, she's 19. So she benefits a lot now from me being able to advocate for all of us, because she now knows at a very young age that she has it, and we're doing all that we can, and all that I've learned in terms of kind of keeping my symptoms at bay. We're doing all of that for her so that it doesn't like spiral completely out of control. And I think that for me, if I'd known that that was even a part of my medical history, or like my family's medical history that I needed to be aware of, I think I would have not suffered so much with pain and symptoms, because I would have known kind of, what was going on within my body, and being able to kind of directly go to, you know, someone. I would, again, caveat this, probably privately in the UK, because of the way that our health system works, and that is 100% a privilege that I have been able to get private help with my healthcare, is what I wanted to say. And I think that I really do think it must be some kind of generation thing where really even more so than now, that people really played a passive role. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, the patient doesn't need to know what's wrong with them, we'll just treat them and do all of these things. You know, she ended up having a full-on hysterectomy, and still no concept of endometriosis ever was thrown her way. So just baffles me. And it has had a direct impact on me, my life, and the medical care that I've received.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. I honestly do. Sorry, I have to pick this up.
It's okay.
Something fell over. I honestly do wonder how much being a woman plays into that. Oh, she's got this thing, but we're just not going to tell her about it. Because that is such a real thing that women in general, especially like women of color and of more impoverished communities, but women in general aren't treated by doctors like they know what's going on. They're not believed. They're not. Yeah. Thankfully, I have not had too many instances of that. I have had a few, and some of them were by women in healthcare who were just, I don't know, but anyway, thankfully I've not had too many of those personally.
Yeah, no, I know, I feel you. I know exactly what you're saying. And I think, it's particularly scary with, what's going on in the US at the moment. And yeah, I mean, just this whole notion of women and access to healthcare and gray areas. I mean, endometriosis in particular. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's so many people who either, even healthcare professionals, who don't know what it is, or it's just bad periods, or and because it doesn't affect men, because men don't have a uterus. I think it's, as conditions go, severely underfunded and misunderstood, and that's really challenging. And I mean, the thing about endometriosis is the way that the condition manifests itself in the body is that it causes scar tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if you have scar tissue in and around the fallopian tubes, I mean, people who have endometriosis are far more likely to suffer from something like an ectopic pregnancy. And, in the US now, if you're in a state where you can't access an abortion, which is the treatment for an ectopic pregnancy, I mean, that again, for somebody with endometriosis, is just terrifying. And I know already what it's like to feel almost like punished by your body in a way as a woman, knowing that you want to have kids, and then to be further punished. It's almost like you have a condition that might cause something to happen, and then being punished for having the condition in the first place, even though you're suffering. I mean, it's just horrendous. So yeah, I think that's also a big point to make at this point in the conversation.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Do you have any? We're starting to kind of like get to our time point. What resources were like absolutely invaluable to you? Maybe what resources would you recommend? How, if somebody is suffering and isn't able to advocate for them, like what would you pass on to the listener?
Oh, this is such a good question. I feel like I have so many things going on in my mind right now. I think the most important piece of advice that I can give is knowing almost, or if you feel like there's something going on in your body, right? And this is for everything, but particularly when it comes to endometriosis, if you notice a change in your periods or something becomes more painful, go and see somebody. But if you can, try and do what I did, for example, was I did some research, but not through like Dr. Google. I was reading medical journals, really, places where I would find accurate medical care. And for example, there's a lot of, I'm going to speak more to the UK, let's say, market, because I don't necessarily know about the US system, but I imagine that it's probably similar on the private side of things. But just for example, if you look online and you go to, let's say, a private endometriosis specialist consultant's website, more often than not, they will have articles about symptoms, and you can almost use those as like a checklist. That's exactly what I did, and then I ended up reaching out to that person specifically, and I am absolutely certain that I shaved off years of being, I was still passed around after that when I moved away from Bristol, But, I shaved off years. At least I got the diagnosis. It was kind of what happened to me after that was not great. But at least if you have a diagnosis, that helps you advocate for yourself, because you can go into appointments saying, no, we're not just going to speculate about what is or isn't wrong with me. You're not just going to tell me that I've got bad period pains. Here's my diagnosis. You have to take me seriously now. And it just gives you a bit more, I hate to say this, but like bargaining power when it comes to those situations. So I would very much, that would be my kind of first point of call, if you will. And then secondly, don't just not to give up. I know that sounds like something that I can't believe I even have to say that, but just because somebody, doesn't believe you or doesn't want to listen to your story or dismisses what is happening to you doesn't mean that it's not there. And it doesn't mean that you have to listen to those people, and just keep fighting for what is true in your body and just to get answers. And the third thing I would say, and this is for like every woman out there or every single person with a uterus, painful periods, like periods that stop you being able to like see a friend, go out to like a cafe, go to the supermarket or whatever, that is not normal. And the sooner that we start actually bringing just menstrual well-being education into schools and, helping people understand that is not normal, so that they can start the journey of getting help and not suffering so much every month. Just getting that piece of education and like information and awareness out there, I think that could dramatically change the lives of a lot of people who are just internalizing and just, tolerating ridiculous amounts of pain on a chronic basis for no reason other than the fact that they think it's normal when it's not.
Right.
Yeah,
that is awesome advice. Thank you for that. I think that's all really important. And I really hope that any listeners who are experiencing anything off with their body really take that to heart.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. I want you to plug yourself. Where can we find you? Because you have so many more resources and all of that. So where can the listener find you on social media? Your website, your new website, all of that.
Yes. Okay. So good question. So on Instagram, which I'd say is like where I'm like most active, and where I try and share as much sort of education and awareness pieces as possible. So I am at outrageously Octavia on Instagram. My website is www.octaviagriffiths.com. Those are the two main places that you can find me. And then I should say that I offer every week. I have sort of a limited number of spots for my free private consultations, and I have had plenty of women with endometriosis book in for those, so that we can have almost like a real deep chat about where they are in their journey, what advice I can give, what I would do if I was at the point that they are at in their journey, and that's those, and working with my clients, they're like being one-to-one with people like this, it's my very favorite thing.
I love that for you, and I'm so glad that your journey again has brought you to a place where you can help other people heal. I think that's really awesome that you're using it for that.
Thank you. Me too. I have to say, I'm so glad that I'm not suffering so much anymore. I think I think that trauma will probably take a long time to go away, but to be helping other people, I think more than anything for me to be able to carry on my dream of working in healthcare, but doing it on my own terms in a way that like supports my body, helps me make other people feel safe, and even down to the people that I hire to work for me, like knowing that I'm really doing good in the world by treating people how they deserve to be treated. It means the world for sure.
Oh, awesome. We need more of you. We need more Octavias.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Of course. Okay. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I think we might need to do another episode together. I think that would be so much fun.
Well, I'm always down. You can count me in for sure.
Love it. Okay, good. We'll talk.
Cool.
We'll be in talks for that.
I feel like this is one of those topics where we could definitely talk for hours and hours.
Oh my
I feel like
gosh.
we've just skimmed the surface of everything, but
I
yeah.
absolutely feel that way too. I was like, I hate that that we have a time limit. I hate it.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Wells Fargo presents one of the surest ways to grow your money. A Wells Fargo CD account, where you can earn a 5.00% annual percentage yield on an 11-month term with a minimum opening deposit of $5,000. Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/CD rates to open a CD account and start growing your savings with us.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.